Testing.
All right, well, ladies and gentlemen, let's get started. Welcome to our league policy meeting during here in the session. I'm Mayor Walker from Draper. If you don't remember, again, welcome everyone. If I could get a motion quickly to approve our January 29th, 2024 meeting minutes. Got a lot of motion seconds. All right. All in favor of approving the minutes, say aye. Are there any opposed? All right, that's passed unanimously. Next, we're gonna start off with we're gonna get right into the action. SB 172, Protection Area Reservations, Senator Hinkins bill.
Do you want to say any preliminary words on it?
Yeah. So how many of you cities in here have a gravel operation in your boundaries? Not that many of you, right? Okay, I do. A big one, if you've driven by the point of the mountain, everyone's familiar with that area. Geneva has a very nice, massive operation there. And I will say, in dealing with Geneva over the years, they really do a good job in their operation. They do all they can to mitigate their dust. They have really complex systems, and they're a fair operator with respect to the work they're doing, which is taking gravel out of the mountain. But it affects Draper in a lot of ways because the size of this gravel operation, it's big and it can get potentially much bigger. Dustin, you want to show just a couple how to make it work? Did I call you Dustin? Okay, I want you to look at that if you can't see it very well. But this is a sort of the blue in here, the purple, I guess it's purple. You can see the existing gravel operation, and then you can see the potential for the future gravel operation. Just to orient you, the tip of that V is right down at where the flight park is. So, you know, if this bill were to pass as it's written, Geneva would be able to operate and excavate that entire mountainside, V right on down. And then if you go to the next one, that one. Maybe you didn't get the other one. Go back to that. Go back. Okay. And if you look at the point of the triangle as it hits the road where the flight park is, the bench, just think about how steep mountain there. Anybody ever ride the Widowmaker in here? You're all too young or not crazy enough. Let me tell you, that was a wild party in those days. I only heard about that. But essentially that mountainside could be V'd out. I mean, that's property they own. Now, Draper City, we've tried to negotiate over the years with Geneva different things, and we haven't been able to ever really come to something we could both live with. But we, in an effort to stop expansion into areas we don't think they should be able to expand into, we filed a lawsuit against them this year, and we're in, it's expensive litigation. We're in the throes of it. On the 31st of January, we had a summary judgment hearing. Our motion, city's motion for summary judgment. And the fight is really about what are the expansion rights? If you have property, can you just go anywhere? Does your contiguous property allow you to have these vested mining rights, we call it now? It's been a gravel operation, now it's mining. And so that oral argument was held on the 31st of January, and the judge is going to make a ruling at the end of March. So that's the position that Draper City's in and what we're in. But, you know, as you look at this graphic, I mean, unfettered ability to operate. This is what it means to my community. I don't know what it means to the rest of you that have them, but this is what it could possibly mean. And you know, there's no, maybe they won't do it. Maybe they wouldn't take the front. I don't know, but they could. They'd have that ability. The other part of this bill that I don't like is I think it's the big camel's nose right through the door of the absolute evisceration of land use authority for us as cities, because you can create another title next year for critical housing need or whatever you want to call it. This takes away the city's ability to control its land. And I think that this bill has problematic in a few of those ways. You can see graphically what it could do to my community, but you can also see what it could do as a lead in, as they say, the lost leader to get you in the door with removing all of our land use authority. We often feel like that's the goal. I don't know that it is, but we feel like it a lot up here. as mayors and city council members. But this is a big camel's no through the door, because this is absolute evisceration of city zoning authority with respect to critical. You title it after that. Good.
All right, thank you, Mayor. So we're gonna run through what the bill does a little bit. So this is SB 172, protection area revisions. I'm gonna run through some of what the bill does. We've got some of the representatives from the gravel industry who are gonna come and answer questions, let you yell at them, whatever you want to do. I warned them. But so let's talk about some of the things that this does. So first, these are the changes that come. So one, expands the definition of mine operator to include an owner of a mining use and a notice of intent. And Nate and Dave, feel free to correct me on any of these if I get them wrong. Expand the mining protection area vesting from existing operations to future mines if the area hasn't been excavated. So there are some implications for what can happen in the future. Extends, oh, sorry, we said extends twice because that's how much extension there is. Extends critical infrastructure operation preemptions to acquisition of adjacent property, regardless of whether it has been excavated. And extends vesting to mining property if the mining operation was conducted on any portion of the property. So there's a lot of expansion on where the operation can expand. Removes the ability of local governments to choose the minimum acreage in a protection area. That's in current law that you can do that. States that critical infrastructure protection area applications are deemed approved if the local government does not take action within 120 days. So I want to pause on this one for a second. There's a shot clock that's put into place now. Once the application is put in, you have 120 days to deal with that application. And I don't know, maybe that's enough time, maybe that's not as problematic, but if you don't deal with it within 120 days, it is deemed approved. So that takes some authority away there. States that critical infrastructure material land use maintain their status, even if annexed by a municipality. A protection area cannot be terminated by a municipality unless the area has not been used for the purpose in the prior 15 years. Allows local government to impose reasonable conditions on protection areas if there is clear and convincing evidence that they present an imminent danger to public health, safety, or welfare. So that is one of the protections that's still in place. And yes, there's another slide. We didn't put them all on one slide. We spread this out because there's enough. Extends the nuisance preemption to mining protection areas, prohibits eminent domain of mining protection areas, modifies the notice requirements for eligibility, states that if a party unsuccessfully challenges vested mining use declaration, they're responsible for the costs incurred by the mining operator, including attorney fees. So it's not on here, but there's a date by which you need to challenge these mining rights, these vested mining rights. I don't know what we call them, Nate, claims or whatever. And if it's not done by that, I think it's May of 2025. That's the date to challenge them. If it comes back that you lose that challenge, then you could be responsible for the attorney fees on that. Presumes the critical infrastructure material operators that are permitted to be protection areas, presumes critical infrastructure material operations have been established. Again, there's the word presume there, have been established unless a person claiming otherwise has clear and convincing evidence to the contrary. So puts that burden of someone challenging it, and then automatically extends protection area preemption to critical infrastructure operators. So I think with that, Nate, if you want to come up, even if you don't, we're going to have you. And Dave Callis is going to come as well. And you guys can explain some of what the background is on this bill, and then you can answer questions about any of this that I just threw up there.
All right. Dave, get up here with me. All right. My name's Nate McDonald. I'm with Clyde Companies. We own Geneva Rock, Sun Pro, and a number of other critical infrastructure companies. I appreciate this opportunity. I am the new guy. Some of you may recognize me from working at DWS, which is probably isn't friendly either because I worked on the housing side and modular housing plans and everything like that. So you can yell at me for a bunch of things, but really the reason why I wanted to come forward and take this opportunity to talk to you is there's a reason why we're calling this critical infrastructure materials. And being a new guy and working on this the last few weeks, I know that there is a lot of questions about, is this about one mine or two mines specifically? And as we've worked together at Clyde's, this is more than that. This is about critical infrastructure materials that are needed in every single home, every single road, every single commercial development. And right now there's not enough. There's not enough that is being produced locally to meet the needs. This is a supply issue, a big supply issue that's only going to grow and get worse. And that's the big reason. When we're talking about the number of transportation projects we can do, well, if concrete and critical materials prices double over the next years because of the supply issues, that's a real issue. If home values or prices to build homes increases by figures of $7,000 to $10,000 because of the increased costs of concrete, that's a big issue. And so I know at Clyde Companies, this isn't about one mine particularly. This is about the impacts on having to be able to preserve the ability to sustain the materials that are needed in the valley. Because if we have to haul it in, the hauling costs increases dramatically the cost of these materials. It also increases the number of big, heavy-duty trucks coming on our freeways, our roads. That increases air pollution and increases a lot of other challenges and concerns. And so for us, this bill is more than just a couple mines. This is truly about having to be able to protect the vested mines. There's not a lot of them. The vested mines that are in place that do produce these materials that are needed for every home, every road, every commercial project. And so that's why this is a bill that we're supportive and we're backing here. So I brought Dave up here. Dave is a familiar face and is the coalition for the Critical Infrastructure Materials Coalition that represents a number of the sand and gravel operators. And anything you want to add or also help out answer any questions?
Sure, I'll be quick here, but just to provide some clarity of this bill. So like Mayor Walker was showing the map of the Geneva property at Point of the Mountain. That is a mine. Okay, so you have mines that mine bedrock. You have gravel pits that mine gravel and sand. If you mine bedrock, you go through DOGM to get permitted. If you mine sand, you're dealing with the local jurisdiction. So vested mining, the mining part of this is in code already. It's part of code. It was made 15 or so years ago. So this legal issue that was presented is in court now based on the 2008 mining statute. This bill is really not making significant changes to that 2008 statute. What it's talking about is sand and gravel and saying, okay, in 2008, or it's probably 2009, the legislature gave, these 4 or 5 rights to a vested mine. And then later they gave 1 or 2 rights to sand and gravel. What this bill is doing is saying, okay, we're going to give all of those rights to sand and gravel that we gave to the mines. And the important thing to note is that there is a very, very high barrier to become vested. You had to be operating and producing a commercial quantity of this material before the city or county existed. Most of these existed prior to statehood. So if you were operating and extracting sand and gravel before county or city zoned you and said you can't mine here, then you can qualify. I can't tell you how many operators there are that meet that, but my best guess is there may be 20, maybe 30 at most, but it's a very small few. And it's saying, hey, these guys are so old and have been here so long. And as zoning has layered up on top of them, we're just saying this is critical that these operations are here and can continue in that use. And when they're done, they can move on and transition to a new use. They can abandon that vested right and build a new Quarry Bend or Southtown Expo Center or USANA Amphitheater or whatever it is. But during that operation, it gives them a right. It's, again, very few operations that probably would qualify.
Okay, with that, let's take some questions. All right, here. Then we'll bring the mic around.
Jason McGuire, South Jordan. One of the things I've heard about this bill is if the mine's able to buy its adjacent property, that its vested mining rights would automatically transfer to that land that the adjacent land that they had purchased.
So again, vested mining was put in statute in 2009. And there is a provision in statute today that says a vested mine can expand onto new land. And so there's currently a process to do that, to go through and expand if you want onto new land. It's not an automatic vesting. So, but you do have a vesting on the land that is within your permitted bound. I think it's also important on this expansion. That's a big question. There's Supreme Court case that's been decided. It's called Gibbons and Reed for those that want to go review it. Gibbons and Reed specifies that mining by nature is expansive. So if you have a 100-acre vested mine and you're on 20 acres of it, the Gibbons and Reed and this bill clarify that you have that other 80 acres that you can expand onto regardless of the zoning of that land. Those 100 acres are vested. Most mine operators don't permit, and by permit, we usually mean bond. They don't bond the 100 acres. They bond for 20 acres because it's very expensive. And so when that 20 acres is done, they move on to the next 20 or 30 acres and they'll bond for that. So what we're trying to get across is you can progress and expand through your vested operation, okay, regardless of the zoning, because that 100 acres is vested. If you want to add to the 100 acres and expand your vesting, there's a process you have to go through, but that's, you can read that, that's currently in the statute under vested mining.
To have the default be that the operations have been established unless there's clear and convincing evidence the contrary is a super, super high legal. Any open. Hi?
That's something that, I mean, I don't want to negotiate it right now, but that is currently in code on vested mining as clear and convincing evidence. So yeah, it's just a repeat. It's in there now. It's been, that was in the original 2009 language, so.
Yeah, so yeah, Lynn, do you want to ask it and I can just repeat it? Yeah, they're getting the mic fixed.
Mineral is where it is, whether it's in an active pit or not. Can you hear me? Oh, thank you.
There it is.
So the justification for the mineral bill, mineral expansion is different than for sand and gravel because sand and gravel can be found anywhere in lots of places. So the challenge that we've got with this bill, the Gibbons and Reed case allows you to expand to the limits of the parcel that is actually being mined. That's different than this bill that would allow you to expand to a parcel that is not currently being mined. So this bill is a substantial expansion of the existing law. I know that's the objective because these materials are essential to construction, but this is a huge expansion of land use rights from what exists today.
So Gibbons and Reed was actually about expanding from parcel A to parcel B, even though mining operations were not on parcel B. So it says that mining use occurred on their stockpiling, storing equipment. And so it said it, just because it wasn't extractive activities, it did allow for eventual expansion. It's true about chasing the mineral trend, and that's, we've stayed with that language, that if on your vested property, you can follow that mineral trend within your vested property. If you want to expand the vested property, as it says now, there's a process that you have to go through to do that.
Christensen with Saratoga Springs. We had someone in our office within the last 2 years, basically trying to claim that a mining operation down near the Knolls, way outside of our city, miles away from our hillside, that they could expand using this type of legislation and come in and mine all of Lake Mountain all the way to the north part of our city. With that kind of expansive right, we would be ludicrous as cities, any one of us, to support any type of legislation that is going to further expand these types of permissive uses. So from that perspective alone, I think we should unitedly say, hell no.
Or comments?
Thank you. Assuming the 2009 decision was not dubious, which I'm still not there, the very population growth that was not present in 2009, which is driving your demand now, is putting stresses on the same location that you want to mine or be able to expand into. So I don't understand this concept. You've already admitted that you cannot just exist where you are, like, I don't know, a Walmart can, or these other things that we're zoning for. So are you telling us that once in our communities, a mine is a parasite for which there is no treatment and we must surrender to it just because you got there first? Because it seems to me that if you stunt our growth, you're stunting your own growth. And by collaborating with us and not preempting us, we could find a symbiotic response to this. But every time the price of something goes up somewhere else, the remedy can't be that the people who elected me don't get me to advocate for them in another location. And this seems an unnecessary preemption that is actually really short-sighted, both for you and disempowering to us. What am I missing here?
Well, I mean, there is an alternative, and that is to haul it all in. And that's the path that we're going, is to have to haul in more and more aggregate into the valley to meet the needs. And so that is the alternative strategy of not protecting these mines. But that we would then have to haul in that aggregate. I mean, it clearly is being produced elsewhere. And the concern is that you have to bring it in to where the growth is happening. And so it's just increasing that truck, the hauling, the labor, and the added road wear and pollution with those vehicles.
At about 40 to 50 miles, the aggregate you're having shipped into your city to build a road, for example, is the transportation cost is higher than the value of what's in the truck. So when you say, hey, we're okay to have these, what? Well, how do you train it into Mill Creek? Yeah. So a lot of places do that. In LA, they barge it in from Canada. In Denver, they're railing it in from Nebraska. What we're saying is there is value to being here. Okay, I'll just end with this one quick example. So a few years ago, they did the I-15 Tech corridor project from Point of the Mountain to Lehigh that expanded I-15. It was a $400 million job. The materials came from Point of the Mountain for that project, for that $400 million project. We just took those numbers of how much material was used, said, okay, let's assume we got that from Stockton in Tooele County, the next closest source of material that was suitable for that job. The cost of that job went from 400 to 470 million, just in increased transportation. So that's something that we all deal with, is the costs go up. So this is a protection to say, hey, these really old operations have been here a long time. Let's let them stay. Let's let them keep using their, probably in some cases, their legal non-conforming use. And that's what the bill is. So.
Okay, let's go. Carson's got a couple in line.
Yeah. So the first question from Paul Larson: is the legislature abandoning its commitment made back in 2009 when we agreed to remove the zoning moratorium? Or is this breaking that compromise that was reached in 2019, I guess, is the underlying question?
That wording has not changed. That is in current code. This bill doesn't address that.
And then there's one other question: would the industry be willing to adopt a local option severance tax? There is some economic benefit to the communities where the mining is occurring?
So we passed legislation last year that that didn't get a lot of support, at least at the league, but it does provide funding for the cities and counties where the extraction takes place, not based off of a severance. Severance usually applies to metalliferous type minerals, but these materials are all subject to the sales tax. So.
Thanks.
How many mines, Kathleen Alder from Providence, how many mines are we talking about?
I don't know the exact number, but it's not a lot. I would guess maybe 20. Perhaps there's 30 statewide. But again, you have to have existed before the city and county or before any of the zoning or restrictions on that property. So when you think about that, there's not a lot that are that old and still operating.
So you mentioned like this would be used like within a 50-mile radius, whatever, to keep the costs down. But what keeps the mining industry from using this to just ship it to the inland port and then send it to California or some other place at our expense?
Well, shipping it is, you could do it a lot cheaper elsewhere. So I don't see a demand for mining in Salt Lake County and then put it on rail and ship it to LA or something. In LA, they've zoned out. In Southern California, they've zoned out aggregate operations. And so primarily they import from British Columbia through the port of Long Beach. A yard of concrete is a lot more expensive there than here. But I'm not sure when you said 15-mile radius, what you're talking about. The point is that the cost of what's in your dump truck is less than the cost of transportation after about 40 to 50 miles of driving the truck. So if you are in your city doing a road project, and let's say you're sourcing the material from an operation that's 20 miles away, the cost is much lower than if that operation is 50 miles away. And so that's the point, is at about 40 to 50 miles, you're paying more for transportation than you are for the material.
Okay, we have time for one more question or comment if anybody wants to take it. If not, oh, we got one more back here.
Seth Perrins with Spanish Fork City. I think, well, maybe, okay. I think this bill, the station of cities and towns, and often fear, and that is the camel's nose in a tent. You probably heard that used in lots of places and lots of times. And the camel's nose probably was the 2009 bill, and this probably to all of us feels like the rest of the body of the camel coming through the tent. Probably not a whole lot that you're going to say to us that makes many or any of us comfortable and like this bill. We hate it, Spanish Fork. So thanks for coming. Appreciate the dialogue, but all of the preemptions and all of the efforts that you're going through just really fly against everything that we as cities are trying to do, and it's just not something that.
I'll just end on saying we understand that, and we understand the concerns there. Our intent, though, is to help just build a little broader awareness that there is great need for this. It's called critical infrastructure material for a reason, and we're lacking it. We're lacking it for the needs that are in this valley, and that's why protecting some of those critical vested mines that we have is important as well.
Right. All right, Mayor Walker, turn it back to you. It sounds like we want to take a specific motion on this one, so.
I guess the camels are just damn ugly as they come in the tent. Anyway, good point. I think we're at the point where we're ready to take a position on this bill as a body. Oh, a motion. We have a motion. I'm ready for one. Ms. Bradshaw, motion us, please.
I'll second.
High oppose, a high oppose motion and a second high oppose? Excellent. All right, all those in favor of high opposition, extreme opposition, camel hating opposition to this bill, say aye. Are there any in love with the camel? Oh, I expect those two back there, Mr. Callis, camel lover. Anyway, I will rule that the camel has lost this round with this group.
I have no idea how to put that on bill tracker, but we'll try. All right, thanks. So we're opposed on this one. So here's the political landscape and where things are at right now. We expect that they will take this to the Senate Majority Caucus. This is the Senate bill, so it goes in the Senate first. This will be in the Senate Majority Caucus likely tomorrow. So we want you all to reach out to your senators. When? Between now and lunch tomorrow. So pull them up now, look them up. Here's some major takeaways that you can use as talking points up here on the board. I'll give you a second, take a picture. Change are necessary, existing operations already protected. Tips the scales in favor of new operations, limits to local land use controls. Bill is expansive, has impacts across the state. Just remember this, like Dave said, we don't know 20 or 30, but they're not all just going to be in one location. So this can impact a lot of communities. This limits local ability to address health, safety, and property right concerns. And a bill this big should probably go back to interim. I hope Dave's taking a picture so he knows how to respond to this. But this is a very big bill, and we got this in the session. We didn't have discussions about this during interim, and this would be a worthwhile thing to have additional discussions about. So call your senators, text them, reach out to them. You're up here on the Hill, go grab them in floor time right after this. But this will be up in the caucus tomorrow, and very good chance it'll be up in committee either Wednesday or sometime this week. So this is a do not wait. Start texting, start calling. I don't care if you get up and leave this meeting to go call them right now. Situation. Okay, go get them. And with that, let's move on to transportation, which is. Thank you, Mr. Gruber.
Good afternoon, everybody, and a couple of tidbits of good news. One, this Wednesday is Hump Day here at the Capitol. So come Wednesday night, we will be officially at the halfway point, which means 90% of the work is still to be done between now and March 1st. So that's the first piece of good news. Second piece of good news is we are making progress on a lot of big issues. I'm going to hit the transportation ones here. I do, though, want to thank Dave and Nate for being willing to be in the hot seat or standing in front of the hot microphone, explaining the context for that bill and taking questions, because regardless of what happens at Senate caucus tomorrow, I expect this issue to continue for the next 3.5 weeks and into the future. So thank you for your willingness to take those questions, and just recognize that regardless of what happens in the next 24 hours, the Garfield issue is it's not going away. So let's pivot a little bit and talk about transportation. We presented this bill in concept to you last week. It had just become public. This is House Bill 367, and Representative Karen Peterson came and spoke to the LPC last week. We've highlighted in orange where we're anticipating some amendments. We presented some amendments to her and the other stakeholders on Friday, and we're hopeful that those amendments will get approved, and we anticipate this bill will be in committee, Transportation Committee, on Wednesday. What's listed as 1 through 8 are the league board principles from this past summer when we started working on what eventually became House Bill 367. And you can see that we've really been able to get to consensus in a lot of those spaces. Again, the amendment coming in the public safety space, I want to just emphasize what this one looks like. As part of the overall conversation up here at the Capitol, there's been a concern that the legislature codifying the transportation utility fee would lead to a quote unquote proliferation of other local government fees. So part of the conversation has been around codifying the transportation utility fee over here, and then looking at other fee authority and potential state guardrails around those other fee authorities. That conversation 6 months ago was around all other local government fees. What's before you in House Bill 367 is really focused on a clarification around our existing authority on broadband, and then some clarifications around general fees for public safety. But we are working through a couple of amendments in that public safety space, particularly focused around smaller communities that contract with one another to be part of a district, as well as smaller communities that use those fees for volunteer firefighting, EMS, or paramedic services. So that's what we will see in the amendments if they're approved before committee on Wednesday. The other thing highlighted in orange that we were working on in potential amendments is around this enhanced notice provision. Again, these pieces have all been heavily negotiated over the last few months with our subgroup and with league staff and the other stakeholders. And we started 6 months ago with a bill file up here that would have preempted the transportation utility fee. And now where we are today is, as Representative Peterson put it last week, in an uncomfortably comfortable space of what the process would look like for a local government to impose a transportation utility fee. So what's highlighted in orange are the amendments we're hoping to see before committee on Wednesday. But knowing that we hit this at the end of the last meeting and it was pretty rushed, we wanted to give people one last chance to ask any questions about it before it moves. Because we're at the point with this one where we're not only are we engaged, but we're walking down the aisle and the music's playing. Mr. Hiskey. No hard questions.
Yeah, you know me. John Hiskey from Taylorsville. One thing I wanted to emphasize, because we were rushed before, this is discretionary. This does not mandate that a city employ this. This is the protection of a tool provided to us from the Supreme Court.
Correct.
That we do have this authority. So it is not mandated. Thank you.
Yep, that is correct. This will be a tool in your toolbox that the Supreme Court has said already exists. What this basically does is put a framework around how to do it. So for the handful of communities that have already done it, they will need to update their fee based on this process, but there's now certainty that comes with the process because it's been codified.
Cam, two comments as you folks think about this bill. The first is, this is a conservative approach. It's establishing reasonable parameters when you are considering adopting a transportation utility fee on process and then also the reasonableness of the fee itself. So it is not a bill encouraging new taxes. It is a bill to establish reasonable parameters in a conservative way about how this tool is utilized. That's point number one. Point number two, this is a great example of the value that the league provides. What was first started out here was the idea of just get rid of this tool completely. Take the tool away from you. To John's point, you're not required to use it, but to have that option of having the tool, and through great negotiation with Cam and the stakeholders and others, we've worked to a point that's a very reasonable approach, and that wouldn't have happened without that detailed, active engagement year-round that the league provides. So good job.
Yeah. Well, thank you, Andrew, and thank you to the members of our LPC subgroup, and then within our negotiations, I knew exactly where you were sitting, Isaac, without, but Isaac and then Wayne Parker, who's now retired from Provo, but Wayne was part of our working group in Pleasant Grove and quite a few others. So again, our recommendation is to support after those final edits, and we're anticipating those amendments any day. We were working through them with the stakeholders Friday afternoon. Okay, next transportation bill we wanted to put on your radar is House Bill 430. This is Representative Candace Perucci's Local Government Transportation Services Amendments. You'll note that the staff recommendation on this bill is position pending, TBD, and that's because what the bill currently says is going to look different than what the bill will say. And several of us, including Andrew from WFRC, as well as representatives from Riverton, Bluffdale, and Harriman, just met with Representative Perucci, well, now an hour and a half ago, to talk through potential changes to House Bill 430. So our recommendation for now is just TBD. Really, her objective is to try to ensure that in her area, she represents the Southwest Valley of Salt Lake County, that these communities in the Southwest Valley are receiving more transit service or proportionate share of transit service compared to the dollars that they're paying into the transit system, and have a reporting mechanism. This dovetails into the Transit Innovation Grants concept that our board adopted a few months ago that's currently part of the governor's budget. As a quick reminder there, we had asked for some state dollars to be available for communities across the state to do transit innovation to increase transit ridership. And that could be anywhere in the state where you could apply for a grant from the state and say, we want to institute this shuttle service for this period of time, and we think it'll increase ridership. The city, the county, the school district, or the school district, the transit district, state could figure out what that pilot program looks like, get one-time money to implement that pilot program, and then you'd have a data set to see, did ridership increase from that transit innovation grant pilot program? And that can inform policy decisions going forward. So there may be some overlap between that concept, which is currently in the governor's budget at $2.5 million, and House Bill 430. But we just want to make sure this was on your radar. Stay tuned. Mayor Palmer or anybody else from that meeting earlier, anything else you guys want to add on this one? Shanky said no. Mayor Hall, I know I saw you earlier. Oh, I see Matt looking a little confused.
Thanks. Just curious, what defines a large public transit district?
Not yours. Yeah, no, it's based on population, multi-county. Yeah, but they can't say UTA in code. So, but it's based on population on multi-county, but it doesn't include High Valley or Park City or Suntran or Katz and Cedar or Cache Valley, et cetera, et cetera. Okay. Okay. So stay tuned on this one. House Bill 449, this bill we wanted to put on your radar as well, because this bill actually would provide additional flexibility to cities and towns. So it's kind of refreshing to say that up here at the Capitol, that the bill is not curtailing your flexibility, it would actually add to your flexibility of how you can spend your Class C transportation dollars. And this would add the term bicyclist facilities. Right now, you can only spend that money based on a statutory list, which is consistent with constitutional guardrails around Class A, Class B, and Class C funds. So this would expand that definition to use it for bicyclist infrastructure. So our staff recommendation here is to support. Before I leave transportation, let me know, did you guys go over appropriations, Justin, before? Where's Justin? Carson, did you guys go over appropriations before I got here? That's gonna be at the end. Okay. Just know in the general transportation space, we are also monitoring quite a few potential specific appropriation requests, and then just the overall base budget for UDOT and the like, Transportation Investment Fund, Transit Transportation Investment Fund, and more. So we'll touch on that when we get to appropriations later. So while these bills are specific to local government revenue or local government flexibility, even in a tough budget year, or as Senator Stevenson would call it, a socks and underwear Christmas year up here, there is still major emphasis on investing in infrastructure, which I think is a real positive for the state. Any questions on transportation before I jump? I guess we're going to, housing, homelessness, or flips. So before I jump to housing, any questions on infrastructure? Okay. Let's talk housing. We told you there'd be some feistiness today. I'm going to turn it over to Jared to talk about where we're at with House Bill 289.
So long as you're not feisty with me, I don't care how feisty you are. So this one we introduced a while ago, and it passed through the House committee. It is House Bill 289. And what this proposed was to add consequential damages as a penalty to that required a district court judge to issue consequential damages if at first the city lost at the property ombudsman level, and then that was appealed to the district court, and not lost at the property ombudsman, but received an unfavorable advisory opinion, and then appealed that to the district court, they would and lose at district court. Consequential damages would be awarded. Right now, we are in continuing discussions with Lisenby made an amendment that changed the nature of the consequential damages, but there are still discussions that are happening on that level. Stay tuned for a possible email alert that you may be getting in the next day or two. So we'll see where that goes in those discussions, but right now. Stay tuned.
So the part I want to add on this is likely up for a vote on the floor, probably tomorrow. It's somewhere around 48th on the reading calendar. They're doing some additional floor time tomorrow in the afternoon. So there is a very real chance that we send out an action alert sometime in the next 24 hours, asking you to reach out to your House members on this one. Consequential damages are just, it's something we cannot live with. That is a line in the sand for us. If consequential damages stays in the bill, then there's just no room to negotiate. We're fighting this one. So watch for an action alert, be on alert for an action alert in the next 24 hours, because we really may send one on this one. We need to stop it on the House floor. And what we also learned last year is the opposite House, so the Senate is not going to backstop us if we haven't fought it in the House first. So we need to go all out in the House, try to kill it there. If it gets through the House and goes to the Senate, then we can work that on the Senate side. But just be ready for that one. This is one we need to fight, and this is one that we've been fighting. So watch out for that one. Action alert, as a reminder, means we need you to reach out immediately to every single rep that we've got and let them know that we have opposition to this bill. Cam, do you want to talk about 37-188 real quick?
All right. House Bill 237 and House Bill 188. These are both bills from Representative Walter from Southern Utah. They're both in the land use space. The reason we're highlighting them for you is because they do impact our land use authority. We've been in negotiations with Representative Walter on House Bill 188. So what you see here is the language that passed out of the House and is over in the Senate side. Our recommendation is neutrality on 188. We've also been in discussions with Representative Walter about potentially adding language to either House Bill 188 or House Bill 237 around how local governments do permits for tower cranes. For a lot of cities, that's really not an issue. For cities that are seeing a lot of urban style development, that is. So we circulated some language at the end of last week, trying to address the problem that was brought to us by some of the other stakeholders. So the reason we're bringing it up in this meeting is if you're a city that sees a lot of urban style development where you have tower cranes being utilized and you haven't seen that language yet, grab us right after this meeting because we want to make sure people are aware of the problem they're trying to solve and what that language looks like. That language could get added into House Bill 188, which at this point, like we're done negotiating on it. It's already over in the Senate, or it could get added to House Bill 237. House Bill 237 is a little more problematic. And at this point, House Bill 237 may or may not move on its own because of the language that you have in there. But we just wanted, the main takeaways, if you are from a city that has urban development, that has tower crane operations in your city, we want to make sure you are aware of that conversation and know it could get put into either one of these two bills. Any questions on those? Our staff recommendation is neutral on 188 and pending on 237 because there's been a lot of discussion on that concept. And again, it may or may not move this year. It may move to the land use task force this interim, but to be determined. Okay. Carson, I see a lot of chat here, but I'm assuming none of that is for me. Okay, I'm just going to keep going. Okay, SB 185. This is another land use related bill, and it's an issue that is come up previously around allowing building permit holders to contract with third-party building inspectors in lieu of going through the building inspection process within our cities, and then requires local governments to accept those third-party building inspections. We have a meeting, Justin and I and Sean Guzman from St. George have a meeting later today with Senator Vickers to talk through this bill. This issue is not a new one. It's come up in legislation in prior years. So we'll be meeting with Senator Vickers later this afternoon. Right now, our recommendation is to oppose as drafted, recognizing Senator Vickers is a former city council member and has always been very reasonable in his approach, very measured in his approach. And we want to have a conversation with him first before we strike up the band and storm the castle. So we want to, again, just make sure you were aware of it, see if there are any questions about it, recognizing we'll be sitting down with them this afternoon.
this bill, I mean, when somebody buys a house in your jurisdiction, they have a fairly confident thought that the city issued a building permit and had an independent inspection done and was looked at and it met the minimum requirements. What this bill would do, this would allow a builder to get his own inspector, could be on his payroll, could be several builders on it, have them on a payroll, come in and do the inspections without the city even knowing the time frame of when they were done, send the slips in and the notices, and you would have no knowledge of that. Then your person buying that home in your city has no ability to know whether their home was looked at by a third-party inspector. I mean, everything that's out there, whether it's an outlet or whatever, is done by third-party inspection before it's built. So this really would have an implication on people who making the largest investment in their life don't know whether or not it had an independent look at it and protected them before they bought it.
Perfect. Thank you. Any other thoughts or questions?
Is that working? Having had a few homes slide off of a mountain last year, all properly engineered and inspected. I mean, I think it's definitely something to be concerned about with respect to the payroll inspector for sure.
Perfect. Well, as I mentioned, the three of us will be meeting with Senator Vickers this afternoon. Our recommendation is oppose as drafted, the recognition that more details to come. Okay. We mentioned this last week, that there's a lot of focus up here right now around particularly missing middle housing, a variety of planning for a variety of housing types, reference the parking modernization guidebook, and a lot of conversations around whether there should be some state policy around parking. I want to thank you for all the slider results last week. Actually, not just last week, but for the last couple of LPCs, we had over 130 responses during those LPC meetings. We've now gone through those results. We've broken them down, not just at a high level, but by classification of city, so we could see where the different flashpoints were within the membership. And that's been very helpful for us as we go back and meet with different stakeholders to figure out potential paths. I still think there will be some language in one of the bills around parking on the missing middle piece and variety of housing types. Let me give you an update on the different moving parts on housing bills. So this should look familiar too, because we put this up on the screen last week. I was just talking really quickly when we put it up on the screen last week because it was after Steve Waldrop's presentation. So rumbling one is House Bill 306, which has been assigned to committee, but at this point has not yet been assigned to an agenda. And Representative Ward has been very responsive to our concerns, and I want to publicly applaud him for his willingness to meet with his cities, Bountiful, West Bountiful, and let's see, he met with Bountiful, West Bountiful, and did meet with and Centerville as well. Yep. And heard their concerns. He's met with us. And at this point, I don't want to put words in his mouth, but he recognizes that he'd have an uphill climb if this bill continued as is. Then we've mentioned that Senator Fillmore had been working on different ideas to potentially put into his bill. Those ideas right now are again been moved to the back burner for the time being. Instead, within what we've called rumbling number 5, and this rumbling number 5, league board members, you'll remember at Local Officials Day, you told us figure out a rumbling number 5 that was separate and different from rumblings 1, 2, 3, and 4. So within rumbling number 5, the focus is more on creating incentives or tools to facilitate more small unit lots, small units on small lots, detached single family units, improving moderate income housing plan reports and the data collection therein. And then what's underlined in blue here is using, whether it's a tax increment zone or the PTIF that Steve Waldrop described last week, to try to facilitate first homes that meet certain criteria around owner occupancy and affordability. So right now, I can report back that since last Monday, we've had hours upon hours of meetings with different stakeholders working on these potential incentive tools. We don't yet have a bill in either of the paths. We don't yet have a bill on the tax increment zone. We don't yet have a bill on the PTIF. We had a meeting late Wednesday night, about 10 o'clock up here. And I want to thank JJ Allen from Clearfield and Ryan Luce from South Jordan and Angela Price from Salt Lake, who on very short notice joined us for a meeting at 5 o'clock that went to almost 10 o'clock as we were working through these concepts. Then another late night meeting Thursday night. And there were some white papers that were circulated over the weekend, but not yet in bill form. So we don't have anything yet for you to officially consider, but just know there are these two different paths, one in a tax increment zone and one on the PTIF side to try to facilitate first homes. We asked you last week via Slido how many of you would be interested in using these types of tools. And I can report back that a strong majority of the Slido respondents said they were interested in using these tools. So we've been able to go back and report to legislators that a more of an incentive-based approach rather than a mandate approach, we think has a lot of appetite in building toward consensus. So let me pause here. I know, Steve presented last week for almost half an hour. We have other issues we need to get to beyond housing, and nothing's been drafted yet. But are there any questions anybody has about any of these potential paths that I can try to answer right now? Great, let's move on. No, are there any questions about either path? Okay. Hold on, wait for the mic. You have a big voice, but wait for the mic. Some of us watch LPC later and it's helpful to.
Yeah,
here's the mic.
thanks. Some of us still have concerns about the details in the Rumbling 5 area. So we get it, we understand. I just don't want you to take silence from this body as consent. So thanks, continue to work it.
Well, you'll notice the staff recommendation, actually, you can't notice it because something popped up there, but there it is. The staff recommendation at this point is deliberate with stakeholders as we're working through those details. And we are trying to rely on subject matter experts from within the city world, both in-house and consultants, to put the meat on the bones here. Okay, that's House Bill 306. SB 168. So this bill came out at the end of the week last week. Is Jared in here? Did he step out? Jared, do you want to give the update here on modular and what's in SB 168 to date?
Sure. So we actually have a bill out now, SB 168, and the goal of modular construction is affordable home ownership. That is the goal. And apparently there's lower building costs and faster construction based on modular construction, and hopefully we hope that those building costs are passed on to the or savings in the building costs are passed on to the homeowner. As far as the modular process goes, these modulars and modulars, you might be thinking of mobile homes, but that's not what they look like. They look and can look like a regular home that is not pieced together on site. So what they do is they build these modulars off site. The plan review of the off-site elements are done at the manufacturing facility. They are inspected off-site by the manufacturing facility and the compliance control. And then there is a third-party inspector that comes in and periodically spot checks each phase of the modular construction process. The third-party inspectors will have to be licensed by the state of Utah as a combination inspector. And then those modules are shipped to the on-site wherever the building is being built and put together. The utilities are connected together, the water, sewer, all of that's connected and put together. And anything, the second that it stops at the building site, that's when the local building authority will inspect those on-site elements, the assembly, the putting together of the house and the connections, all of that. So any on-site elements will be still within the purview and authority of the local building official. And then one thing to note that is in the bill is that with certificate of occupancies that are issued, there is a provision in there that allows cities to give a statement stating that we are immune from liability for anything from the on-site, obviously, or I'm sorry, from the off-site construction. Anything that happens off-site, we are not liable. So we can put that actually on our certificate of occupancies and when we issue those. Any questions with this one? Yeah.
As much as I think that we need modular homes and faster ways to build them, this is a little bit like HB 185, where we don't want to give permission for outside inspectors.
Well,
We just need to keep that in mind
you're
because
right.
the concept is the same. So how do we differentiate?
You know, and I asked that question and you're right. As we talk to the code officials, and we've been in conversation with them, they were not concerned about the third-party inspectors doing the off-site inspection, being a combination inspector. I can just tell you that's where we're at. They were not concerned with that. And in talking to Representative Peterson, the state building official, one thing that he did say is when you've got on-site construction, there's a lot of variables, frankly, that you have to deal with, the weather, and all that goes on on-site construction. With off-site construction, if you look at the process, it's pretty amazing. There's machines that build full-on modules that are quite precise and don't have the weather concerns. They're built in the actual manufacturing facility. So when I get it. Yep. Understood.
Gary Hill, Bountiful City, and that's a great question. I'm just looking for confirmation, but I seem to, and you addressed most of this, but I seem to recall when several of us looked at this bill early on, this concept that our issue as cities was that the inspection be done appropriately, and that where every element of the modular portion is done consistently, that takes a big concern away from us, and provide, as long as we have the on-site and the site-specific, maybe more to the point, the site-specific issues, that's where we feel like there's an appropriate role for the cities. So I think that's part of the reason our building inspector isn't concerned.
Thank you. Any other questions? Uh-oh.
Just a quick question. Is there any notice to the purchaser that this is a modular construction unit so they know what they're buying?
Typically, even before they buy, they'll know that it's going to be a module. So they know what they're buying when they buy it. So yeah.
I think we should support this bill as well, because I think this does really impact price of homes. And I think we still get to inspect the stuff we need to inspect. Well, hopefully, unless the other one.
Yes. No, we've pushed back on any idea of the local on-site building being done by anybody other than the local jurisdiction building authorities. And I should mention that quite a few, and maybe your cities or towns already do this, quite a few towns at least who are overloaded by work actually contract out to third-party inspectors to do what they can't do because of the workload that they have. So it's already actually happening based on contract, but that's again through the city contracting that out, that service out.
Mike Winder, Mill Creek City Manager. I think we should support this one. There's a lot of housing stuff flying out here that we have to oppose because it does preempt and cause problems. So it's nice when we can be an agreeable group and not just the department and know every time. And this seems like one that I think we can in good faith support. And it could be a game changer for some affordable housing for our kids and grandkids. I think it's worth supporting.
Jared, there's a few questions online. This might be a hard one, sorry. About does the city inherit any liability if they approve or if they do the last part of the inspection, but there's some incident with the module or the module and it occurs within the module? So like, is the city only responsible for the parts they inspect and then?
Yes.
Okay.
That was an easy one. And we should all be mindful that there are protections in the Governmental Immunity Act as well for building officials. So that's another protection as well.
Perfect. Thank you, Jared. This actually, when Jared got hired, this was the first issue we put him on to lead out on within the Commission on Housing Affordability. So thank you, Jared, for the great work on it. This is, you'll see at the top, Commission on Housing Affordability, or Commission on Housing Affordable, whatever. Commission on Housing Affordability, Bill number 1. Commission on Housing Affordability, Bill number 2 is now House Bill 465. So you'll see it says 2 HBs en route. That's because when we finished the slides 2 hours ago, the bill number wasn't out. Now it's out, right? It's House Bill 465. This is what we're anticipating being in it. And Carson, I guess I'm looking at you. 465 probably still doesn't have all this in there yet, right? Yeah. So our recommendation, recognizing we've spent months negotiating through the Commission on Housing Affordability, will be ultimately to support this bill, but there are still some moving pieces. There's still a moving piece on parking. There's moving pieces on the State Infrastructure Bank. At this point, we are not anticipating what was one of the consensus items from the Commission on Housing Affordability was to fund the State Infrastructure Bank focused on projects to unlock housing units. At this point, we're not anticipating that to proceed because the pivot has shifted to the tax increment financing tool and the PTIF tool that we described earlier. And then there's still some moving pieces there. And then the second bill that Representative White has is the land use task force items that have been negotiated throughout the interim in these particular spaces. That this is also a consensus bill after a lot of hard work over the last few months. It just isn't ready for prime time today because it's not yet numbered. Oh, this one's number 2? Is land use task force 1 numbered? No, not yet. Okay. Yeah, I know it went to processing over the weekend and just didn't make it in time. Okay. Lots of moving pieces still in the housing space. Let us know if you have any questions there. But I do want to emphasize that the level of collaboration between the governor and his team, House leadership, Senate leadership, Representative White, Senator Fillmore, Representative Musselman, all of us has been really positive. And we're cautiously optimistic that over these next few weeks, that level of collaboration will stay high. So stay tuned in the housing and land use related spaces. You want to hear first?
I was going to.
Molly, take it away.
Before we got into homelessness policy, we wanted just to chat through appropriations really quickly, since we didn't get a chance to do it at the top. So first thing I want to put on your radar of a lot of the appropriations we were tracking specifically for housing and homelessness, we're going through social services and they prioritized today. So of the ongoing appropriations, the shelter mitigation was 6 of 53. Housing and community development staff was number 50, 51 for statewide homeless system support, and 52 for the Olin Walker Housing Loan Fund. Deeply affordable stabilization grants were not prioritized. Big note I want to put on here for you is that the social services is prioritizing their list and they're sending it to executive appropriations. We don't know exactly how much money social services will have. There will probably be a cutoff line somewhere in here, but we don't know where that is for both the ongoing and the one-time money. For social services one-time appropriations, there were 42 items that they prioritized. You can see those all here. I won't read through them all, but they're there for you. Do want to note though that the first time home buyer program and the deeply affordable housing grants were not prioritized. Again, just because something is prioritized doesn't mean it will get funded. Also vice versa, things move around in executive appropriations. But this does give you kind of a good sense of where things currently stand. Are there any questions on any of those? David Spatafor, please wait for the microphone, but then we'd love to hear from you.
Thanks, Molly. Not that it may mean anything this year, but historically, because of all of social services, whenever the chair believed that executive appropriations thinks some programs are, whenever the chairs believe that EAC thinks that some programs are going to be funded at the EAC level, they choose to not prioritize them out of their committee because they don't want to take those, like the the $85 million in that account, and push everything else down. So just because they're not prioritized does not mean they won't get funded.
Thank you. And then we have John Hiskey up front, really making you work for it today, Liam. Well, we need it for the online folks. Yeah.
Molly, thank you so much. Your work on this has been incredible, but may I just ask clarification on two items up there? The one that is number 28, Utah First Homes, 25 million, that received a prioritization. Is that the governor's?
I believe so. That's
You
the
believe so?
governor's, yeah.
And so thus on not prioritized first-time home buyer program, 50 million, I'm assuming that's the one Senator Adams or President Adams had for people purchasing for the first time?
I believe so, but
Believe
I
so.
am not
Okay.
sure.
And still
Yeah.
nothing, and I'm sure there's
Yeah.
not on existing homes. And that was not even prioritized, so I'm sure that's, everything's toward construction, correct on that. Thank you.
All right, and then some other appropriations, we're just looking at grant for Cameron City Councils, STR tax compliance and transit innovation grants. So with that, we'll go through all of our slides again, just in case you missed them. Perfect. So last week we chatted with you about some revisions that we were anticipating to Representative Clancy's HB 298 homelessness services amendments. We were really worried about the first bill that came out. We were negotiating with Representative Clancy and other stakeholders for a while. I definitely want to give Representative Clancy a lot of credit. He has had a lot of pressure from a lot of different stakeholders on how to deliver on this issue, and he did a really nice job listening to us and hearing our concerns. This bill is reducing the State Homeless Council from 27 members to 9 voting members, 10 members total, and it renames it to the Homeless Services Board. So just by that alone, we were going to lose seats. We are now reduced from 5 seats to 2 seats. One of those will be for the Salt Lake City mayor, and then another is going to be mayor selected from the Shelter City Advisory Council. That is a new council that's being created, essentially that every mayor or their designee from a qualifying tier 1 or tier 2 shelter city will have a seat on. That group will select who the other mayor is, and they will also have the flexibility to provide feedback and suggestions to the Homeless Services Board. Additionally, this had 2 other components. One were some updates to the Code Blue provisions. Last week, we were under the impression that this would really only deal with the governance and data collection, but the Code Blue provisions were still in there. For Code Blue, it does allow for camp abatements. Specifically, the intent of this was that there are many times where a camp situation is unsafe and potentially more unsafe than the weather. And so giving public safety the bandwidth and capacity to kind of put someone in a safe environment if they don't have access to one. And then it also clarifies that if a building is going to be used, a publicly owned building, the kind of the appropriate legislative body needs to approve of that. So we have Taylorsville in the front row. If Salt Lake County wanted to use a Taylorsville city building, the Taylorsville City Council would need to approve of that. The county couldn't just choose to do it. Yes, Mary Tran. So yeah, so if it's a county-owned building in Kaysville, the county determines whether or not it can be used for Code Blue. Yep. And then it increases data collection and reporting from OHS. And as we recommended, again, that we support this as it's currently drafted, understanding that this was a pretty significant policy overhaul, and that this bill is likely needed to secure any of the funding that we're hoping to get for this system. Last week, Representative Elison also had his homeless bill come out. It is a lot of technical cleanup and small revisions compared to Clancy's, looking at what has existed in his legislation over the past 2 years. It increases the Code Blue temperature from 15 degrees to 18 degrees, which factors in wind chill and other components. It allows municipalities to implement their own emergency measures. So we've often heard Ogden, for example, goes into Code Blue at a higher temperature. St. George would like the latitude, right, in extreme heat to kind of implement some emergency services in their municipalities. So this essentially says that everyone must comply with Code Blue. However, if you would like to go, above and beyond and have a different standard above that, you are welcome to. It requires municipalities who receive mitigation funding to enforce their pedestrian safety ordinances. We have some concerns about what exactly this means and how you determine compliance, but we're going to continue to work on that with the sponsor. And then it also has some technical cleanup with the mitigation funding. Right now, OHS gets their projections for the year, they make their contracts, and then once the contracts are made and kind of underway, they get their actual numbers, and then they have to redo all the contracts, pull everyone back in. And their suggestion was, let's just do it based on the projections we have, and then any additional money will just roll over into the following year into all the correct tiers. So if, for example, it's projected we have $10 million, we're going to budget out the $10 million. If it comes out that we have 11 million, we're going to roll that 1 million into the next year and just to be allocated the same way. So that's a technical provision that they were looking at. And then there was a drafting error with the offset language last year. And so this is just clarifying that it's $250 per qualifying bed per year. And staff is recommending that we are neutral on this bill as it is currently drafted, and we will continue to work with the representative specifically on getting some clarity around that pedestrian safety ordinance. Any questions?
Only question I have is, because a city owns a building, they have a say on it. But if a county owns a building in your city, you don't have a say on it?
Under Code Blue, yes.
That doesn't make any sense to me, because a lot of the counties have a lot of buildings in a lot of cities. Have no building, we have a say. It's your city, it's your jurisdiction, it's your constituents that buy. Why would you not want the city to have the say?
Sure, and I think, and again, this is kind of the impetus behind the bill. I'm not, their sentiment was in Code Blue, the prerogative is to keep people alive. And so it isn't saying that a city is obligated to open anything within their jurisdiction. You just cannot stop someone from doing it if they want to. So for example, in this language, a lot of what we're seeing are churches opening up as well. So if a church is meeting relevant building code and wants to open up in my city, I do not have a say as to whether or not they do so if they are complying with building code. And that was kind of the precedent that was established within 499 last year and the clarification therein.
I'm going to remember my question. Okay, my question was, as far as this being the Code Blue for House Bill 499, the Code Blue requirement was that it was a 2-year shelter, temporary shelter requirement. Is that addressed in this, or is that going to be addressed in the
That's
499?
a good question. So last year, HB 499 did 2 very similar things, which are confused a lot. It created Code Blue, which applies to counties of the 1st through 4th class in perpetuity. Code Blue says that regardless of the time of the year, if it is going to be 15 or potentially now 18 degrees or colder, there are a lot of limitations as to what you can do as a city or as a county, but you aren't necessarily given any affirmative duty, right? So in Code Blue, if a church in Molly City wanted to open up and they were compliant with building code, Molly City could not make them stop. That is Code Blue. It is tied to temperature. It has no end date. HB 499 also created winter response plans, and those are time bound, and those are projected to run until the winter of 2025, 2026. And that is what gives first and second class counties an affirmative duty, and the municipalities they're in, to make sure that there is some type of shelter available from October 1st, 15th, thank you, October 15th through April 30th. And so it's tricky because those were introduced at the same time. They will likely overlap, right, while those are being created, but they are different at the same time. So for example, under Code Blue, if a church, as I mentioned, right, wanted to open up on a night it was going to be 10 degrees, I could not stop them. However, if in the winter response plan, Cam is my county and he said, we want to put the winter shelter in your city, I could say no to that until the fail-safe was activated. And so that's essentially saying I can say no as long as there's something available in the county. If nothing becomes available in the county, the state steps in and the state can place it where they want. No, no. So yes, so to repeat it, so we had another question of what is again Code Blue and what is winter response? Code Blue is temperature driven. Winter response is time driven. Does that answer? Right, so Code Blue, unless the law changes in 2042, if it's 9 degrees outside, Code Blue is activated.
Said, you know, Tammy City, we want to put a shelter in your city for Code Blue. I thought that, when does that 2-year trigger happen? It's not Code Blue, it's only winter.
Yes. So if
shelter?
So if I am the county and I say I want to put a Code Blue facility in Tammy City, if it complies with building code, you cannot say no. If Molly County wants to put a winter response facility in Tammy City, you can say no, so long as there is something sufficient available within the county. And you kind of run the risk then, right? So if you say no and Liam City has something available and Liam City consents, then it could go in Liam City. If you both say no, something needs to go within the county, and there is potentially a risk that it could go into one of those facilities.
Okay, thank you, thank you.
Bettina Smith Edmondson, Layton City Council. So to piggyback on Mayor Tran's comment, and just to clarify further, I think you're asking also that the winter response plan is the one that is time limited, that has an end date, but Code Blue does not have an end date. So if the request were to place some type of facility in any given city, if it was for winter response, there is a time limit. And that would end in 2026, is that what you said?
Correct. And we were able to negotiate a protection that if, say, a facility was placed in Molly City for winter response, it could never be turned into a permanent facility without my consent.
And then for Code Blue, that is forever and always, but it is still temporary and is only based on temperature.
Correct. I think we saw, Lynn, did you have your hand up?
Just a quick question about the panhandling or pedestrian safety ordinance. The language of the bill requires not just the ordinance, but the enforcement of the ordinance.
Correct.
And so it leads to the question about what ordinance language is sufficient code. And then the question is, who determines whether or not our enforcement?
Yeah.
But same as I think, same questions we would have on enforcement of camping ordinances, things like that.
Exactly. And that's, so I thought I mentioned earlier, I may have not, that's one of the issues that we're working on with the bill sponsor is exactly how do you determine compliance? And is that something that ought to be in statute? Or given the expanded role of the Utah Homeless Board, is that something that they will determine?
All right, we have just a couple more minutes. We don't have a committee coming in this room right after, but still want to try to get as close to on time as we can here. Just want to run through a couple more bills. Oh yeah, that is up there. So SB 91, Local Government Officers Compensation Amendments. This is Senator Chris Wilson's bill. Several of you have reached out to Senator Wilson on this. Several of you have reached out to senators on this. It's still passed out of the Senate unanimously. What this requires is separate public hearing for the adoption of increased compensation schedules for municipal officers. Now you may be asking, what is a municipal officer? You know, municipal officers, elected officials, your treasurer, your recorder, those are statutorily required, and whatever else your ordinance says is an officer, or I should say whoever else your ordinance says is an officer. For some cities, there are a lot of officers. For some cities, there are nothing more than those statutory ones. But the separate hearing must be noticed. And it's got a list up there of what we got. The reason we're putting this back on your radar is because, again, it passed through the Senate unanimously. This will go into a House committee, likely the House Political Subdivisions Committee. And we may be reaching out, asking for people to reach out to the representatives on this one. On the Senate side, because of the amount of senators that serve in leadership, they were able to have a committee of 2 people to start the committee, to have a quorum and to vote this one out. One of the fun quirks of some of the committees. The House will have more than 2 people on the committee. So that will give us an opportunity to talk to more than 2 people and perhaps get a different outcome on this one. Seth Perrins and I are going to go meet with Senator Wilson right after this meeting to once again express the concerns and see if there's any room to work. But just watch for this one. It wouldn't be necessarily a full action alert, but we may need people reaching out to committee members on this one. Energy security amendments. Yeah, Mayor.
My concern with this is if I decide to give my treasurer at Christmas time a little card to go to Macy's to get food for his family, I'm going to have a public hearing.
Maybe.
Because it's compensation. It's not, it doesn't say salary. It says compensation.
So that's one of the things we'll go talk to Senator Wilson about then.
I want to go with you.
You're welcome. This one, just putting this one on the radar as well. We're currently opposed to this, but this is SB 161, Energy Security Amendments. This is dealing with IP. I was waiting for Kate's head to snap up, and it did. Dealing with Intermountain Power Agency. This is a bill that there's a lot of discussion going on. I don't want to necessarily run through all of it, but this is something that we got up and spoke against in committee. There is going to be certainly some changes on it at some point when it hits the Senate floor. But just know we may come back and talk about this when more there's some potential wider ranging impacts to all of the IPA discussions. Just wanted to make sure that you are aware that this moved out of committee. It is on the Senate floor. And when we see the next draft, we'll see how much we hate that one, because I'm sure we won't love it. We are having a pose on it. If you want to change it to whatever we did, camel oppose earlier. Let's see. Do you want to hit this one real quick, Carson? On.
I'll pivot away from that really quick. So Senate Bill 135, Senator Harper's Advanced Air Mobility and Aeronautics Amendments Bill. A lot of you have raised concerns about this. There's a second substitute out. The basic gist of the bill is Senator Harper is trying to respond to a number of concerns that have been brought about by the Cybersecurity and Infrastructure Security Agency, or CISA. There's been concerns about drone security and whether that enables additional spying or additional malware for about, well, 2 separate presidential administrations and 2 of those agency heads. So that's what Senator Harper is trying to address with this bill. Last meeting, several public safety officials brought concerns to the committee, identifying that this would, what the bill originally said is you can't use drones from China or Russia, or drones that are manufactured in those countries for public infrastructure, or to inspect public infrastructure, or to do almost anything after 2028. So you couldn't buy them after 2025. You couldn't use them at all after 2028. Senator Harper, responding to our concerns, is trying to narrow it down and say, you can use them for search and rescue. You can use them to help SWAT teams. You can use them for general surveying your city, but you can't use drones produced by these two countries specifically to inspect critical infrastructure facilities, which is defined in code as refineries, chemical manufacturing facilities. There's a bunch of them. Probably the big ones for us are water storage, pumping, and treatment stations. I know that some of your jurisdictions still have concerns about this because you use drones for those purposes. That's actually not defined there in that specific section, but so you can still use drones there if you want. So far, yeah. So yeah, really the senator's trying to narrow this to address our concerns. We're not recommending a position quite yet because I know we're still trying to work through some details, but I just wanted to provide you an update if your city's been watching this one closely.
Okay, scenic byway. All right. This one, so we've talked about this one a couple of times. There's a new substitute out that took the scenic byway committee from new changes, the proposed ad hoc, back to the current Utah Scenic Byway Committee. So leaving that in place as to where it is right now, the legislature would still give final approval to the recommendations from the committee, which is a slight change from right now. There are certain times the legislature approves, certain times they don't. So the legislature would be giving final approval. But the concerns that were raised about someone from the billboard industry being a member of the committee have been alleviated. It's just gone back to what the committee was previously. So just want to report back on that one because we've talked about it a few times. And with that, Mayor Walker, I think we're almost to that point. I will jump that one. There are a couple bills. I'll do this really quick, Jared, unless you want to jump up. There are a couple bills dealing with religion in the public works plate. HB 396, HB 460, SB 150. We've had conversations with both Senator Weiler on SB 150 and Representative Brammer on HB 396 and expect to see some changes. So letting you know that we are looking at those, but we expect to see some changes. When we see what those changes are, we'll bring them back to you to have a further discussion. But just wanted to bring those up because people have asked if we're looking at them. And yes, we are. And yes, we've had some meetings and looking for ways to make those better. So quick reminders. Action alerts that are potentially coming out. One, HB 289, property rights ombudsman amendments. This is the attorney fee bill. Look for an action alert on this one potentially in the next 24 hours when we see this getting closer to the House floor. We want to vote no on this, particularly so long as there is anything with damages involved in the bill. Protection area revisions, our favorite gravel pit bill, SB 172. I hope you're already reaching out on this one. We expect to be in Senate caucus in the next tomorrow at lunch. So please be reaching out to your senators on this one, starting right now if you haven't already. And we're looking for some opposition to that one. SB 91, local government officer compensation amendment. This is one we may need help with in the House committee, reaching out to legislators. So be watching for this one. And then because we don't vote no on everything, housing affordability amendments, 168, we may be reaching out looking for help with aye votes there. And for local government fee modifications, the tough bill, House committee also looking for support on that one. If you want to call up your reps and senators and say, we do like some stuff, and this is what it is. So just look for those. It's stuff is heating up and moving fast and furious. But Mayor, with that, I think we're ready for the bill tracker.
All right, is there a motion to approve the bill tracker as presented?
Oh, hold on.
We got a motion.
That's fine. She wanted to speak to one of the bills in the bill tracker. I was coordinating with her and almost missed the vote. Come just do this. Yes, please.
Carson, if you have the map, if Carson can pull the map up. Hi, Mayor Zoltansky from Sandy. I wanted to bring something to your attention, put it on your radar. There's a House Bill 330 by Representative Tusher to eliminate the unincorporated county islands. And Sandy has pockets of county islands. White City started as a county island and then they incorporated as the township of White City. We have Sandy Hills, that's further west in Sandy, and then we have the Granite area. So as the map shows, it's pretty much in the approach to Little Cottonwood Canyon. And I don't know how many cities have unincorporated parts of the county in their city. It's kind of like having little parcels of the Vatican. And when you go on Dimpledale Road, you see this, it alternates. It's a patchwork between Sandy City jurisdiction and the county. It wraps around and goes to the north toward Little Cottonwood. So this is the section of the Granite Community Council, and the Granite Community Council boundaries are decided by the Salt Lake County Council. So Representative Tusher's bill does two things. It eliminates county islands within 3 years. So county islands need to annex into their larger community, their larger city neighbor within 3 years. And then it also, the second part that is concerning to Sandy, it allows community councils to incorporate. It gives a path to incorporation. So as you can see, delivering city services, whether it's snowplow services, water main, police, fire, Sandy City already does the fire service for Granite and White City and the other unincorporated parts of the county within our borders. There's a lot of inconsistency to city services delivering who's responsible for what, not to mention the sense of where do we live? We've got a Sandy address, a Sandy zip code, Sandy Fire is responding to us, but we're not part of Sandy. So it gives a lot of inconsistent messages to residents who are trying to establish a community identity. Granite community is historic, and just like we have in historic Sandy, we have historic neighborhoods, and historically more of Granite, historic Granite, is incorporated into Sandy than is remaining in the unincorporated islands right now. So this is really an effort to clean up city services. The reason the county doesn't want to service the islands is because it's cumbersome, expensive, remote. And for those same reasons, a future new incorporated city would have those same challenges, and it would also impact Sandy greatly. You might have seen on the news this week, we had a giant water main break that caused a huge sinkhole. If it happened on Dimpledale Road, it might be both in Sandy and in Salt Lake County. If there's a burglar that's apprehended in one jurisdiction, but the crime committed in the other, I mean, that we deal with that in law enforcement, but the likelihood of dueling responses for every city service increases greatly. So for that reason, Sandy's really concerned, and we're continuing to work with the bill sponsor, Representative Tusher, to talk about the real world impacts of having non-contiguous incorporated cities in our borders. This is just by the numbers real quick, 2.5 square miles, 20 islands in this map, 20 islands, 188 homes, less than 300 residents. And this would prevent that sense of cohesion of our community that we care a lot about, not to mention the inconsistency of services and the expense to both Sandy and to a newly incorporated city of delivering basic services to the area. So for these reasons, we are troubled by the second part of Representative Tusher's bill. We are continuing to speak with the bill sponsor. My team has spoken with him personally on as late as Friday afternoon at the end of the day. So we hope to come up with a better solution. If the bill were to eliminate the ability for a community council to incorporate, we would be fully supportive. But with the incorporation component of this bill, it is very troubling. Sandy is opposed at this time, and I may be reaching out to you through the league to ask for your support in opposing this as this percolates through. So I wanted to bring this to your attention. And if you had any other insight, experiences of having unincorporated parts of yours within your city boundaries, please let me know. White City is the donut hole in Sandy. It makes sense though, because it's a contiguous border. It's its own cohesive city within a city. But pockets and islands and patchwork, I don't think I need to convince this audience the problems with that. So thank you for your time. Thank you for consideration. And if you have any suggestions or advice for me, I'd welcome that.
All right, so the motion to approve the tracker with that change, is there a motion? Motion or question? Ask.
So move to approve the bill tracker. It's related to this last bill. Just, I think we have a current position. Is that right? On bill. Has anything changed from that bill since we took a position of neutral on it?
Yeah, thank you, Gary, for that question. That's in part why I asked Mayor Zoltansky to come up. We've been coordinating closely with Sandy about the bill and trying to figure out what would be workable for Sandy City within House Bill 330. So our recommendation was neutral based on the direction of Sandy City. Sandy still has some concerns with a piece of the bill. So what their recommendation would be is that we would shift from neutral to, would it be neutral to position pending while you're still negotiating? Sandy's currently has pieces they're opposed to. So we would shift from neutral to position pending to give that space for that conversation. But I'm looking at the mayor who's pointing at me without a mic. Now she's got the mic.
Oppose unless the incorporation were removed.
Okay, so it would be, it's been neutral to date, but it would shift to oppose with the acknowledgement. There's a lot of back and forth happening between Sandy and the representative. And we think Sandy's the only city that's directly impacted by this bill. So we go to no position when when we can't get to 60% for neutral, support, or oppose, then the default becomes no position. So that's why position pending. Yeah, position pending is that in-between space while the dialogue's still going.
So let's do the bill tracker first. Leaving this one off, we'll vote on that. Motion to approve the bill tracker other than Mayor Zoltansky's bill. Do I have a motion still? Second? Second. All in favor of the bill tracker as approved with this particular bill yet to be voted on, say aye. Are there any opposed? All right, that seems to be the 60%. Now going back to what's 330? Do we have a motion to take no position? Position pending until further negotiation on HB 330. Is there a motion? All right, we've got a motion. Is there a second? All right, all in favor of that position, say aye. Any opposed? All right. Thank you. Motion to adjourn. Second. All in favor? Aye.